I got a new home, home in Zion.
And that album was the first gold platinum album in Christian music.
I believe in love.
And Elvis in his career won 3 Grammys and were all for his gospel recordings, because that was really his first love.
Think about gospel as being music that talks about God as a central part of your life. Now, God is not up there somewhere. That is the liberating part of gospel, right? Well, my name is Reverend Robert Jones, and I come from Detroit, Michigan. I have a really Southern roots. I was blessed that my mother came from Southern Alabama, town called Evergreen. And my father is from West Point, Mississippi. I have the good fortune of having been raised in Motown, but exposed to a lot of Southern music. And my grandmother, I jokingly say, was a drug woman because she drugged me to church all the time. And the idea was that you are exposed to blues and R&B, jazz and folk, but really exposed to gospel, being raised in the church and the spiritual. This is where it starts, where European music met African music in the Deep South. And if you came over on a ship like the Mayflower, you brought your scale with you. You brought, and, you know, that's the way you get from the E to the E, right? But if you came over on a slave ship like the Amistad, you brought your scale with you. And you came, starts on the same note, ends on the same note, gets there in only 5 steps. We call that the pentatonic scale. Imagine it's 1840 and you're standing outside of this old weather-beaten building and the doors and windows are flung open to get a breeze through, and you get this sound. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. And essentially, you're standing in front of a white Methodist church. I jokingly say, you know they're Methodist because they're always checking the hymnal. And you know they're white because that song lands right on the beat. And it doesn't have a lot of improvisation going on. It's like, amazing grace, because that's the European aesthetic, right? But the folks who came over on the slave ship, they brought the African aesthetic. This scale. Step into the bad side. So when they sing that song, it comes out more like maybe, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I I see. And sort of the difference between those two versions is what happens when the African meets the European and it becomes the American. Pharaoh, Pharaoh, Pharaoh's army sure got surrounded, Pharaoh. The idea is whether you could read or not, you knew about the children of Israel, and you knew that Pharaoh had them in captivity. And Pharaoh's army got drowned. So in other words, God won, right? The children of Israel were free. Gospel and sacred music, you know. I think it starts with songs like Pharaoh. It starts with songs like the Dr. Watts hymns, when the missionaries and the preachers, especially the Methodists, who always had the idea of John Wesley and the importance of singing, when they would bring the hymnals and they would teach folks who were on a plantation, enslaved folks. And so you had the old deacons who would maybe hear a verse, hear a line, and they would put that African aesthetic on it. But in that barn where the enslaved folks would get the chance to sneak off and have their own service, what Frederick Douglass called the invisible church, that song would become, I love the Lord, he heard my cry. And people would sing it back. I love the Lord, he heard my cry. And I think that for many years, nobody quite knew what Black sacred music sounded like. And it's in like the 1870s that you get this group of young people from Fisk University. They had a choir director by the name of George White. Then one day he walks in and he hears the kids singing the songs that they grew up with, the old Black spirituals. And, you know, it's songs like, Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I wanna cross over in the campground. But when Mr. White hears that, he hears this body of music that he didn't even know existed. And he's like, where'd you guys learn those songs? Well, we sang those songs at home. So he got a hold of that idea of the Europeanized presentation along with the Black spiritual, and it became the concert spiritual. So you sing it more like, Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Don't you want to go to that gospel feast, to that promised land where all is peace? Deep river, I want to cross over into campground. And so people around the world are experiencing authentic African American music, kind of Europeanized, but it's still Black music. But as the preachers become more better educated and they're going to seminary, they don't necessarily want the old spirituals the way they used to do them. They don't. There's a style of music that's come up called the prayer and praise hymn. Not necessarily folks who are reading hymnals. It's repetitious. It's like energy. And the thing that's cool about this stuff is like You don't have to really be a music scholar to sing it, but even as in that repetition, you have a build of emotion. Think about a song like I got a new home over in Zion, and it's mine, mine, mine. I got a new home over in Zion, and it's mine, mine, mine. And the next verse might be, well, I got a new home over in Zion, and it's mine, mine, mine. I got a new home over in Zion, and it's mine, mine, mine. Right? But there's a blues man from Georgia, Thomas Dorsey, Georgia Tom Dorsey, they called him. He's a piano player. He plays along with a kind of raucous guitar player by the name of Tampa Red, whose name was Hudson Whitaker. And they're in Chicago, and they're creating a style of blues that's kind of like a little bit raunchy, a little bit naughty. It's called hokum blues. But Thomas Dorsey grows up, and he starts to play piano for revivals. And his father's church is the Pilgrim Baptist Church in Chicago. He's playing a revival in St. Louis. Well, he gets a telegram that tells him to hurry home because your wife, who's been married less than a year, maybe a little more than a year, but she's about to go into labor, and it's not looking good. And so he jumps on the train, he comes back to Chicago. He has, in the meantime, decided that sacred music needs is a little infusion of blues. This. I got a gal who's crazy about me. She's just as crazy as a gal can be. She ain't crazy, she's just funny that way. I mean, that kind of vitality is what's missing from sacred music in the late 20s, going into the 30s. So he takes that, he comes up with a song called Bedside of a Neighbor, sells 10 copies. It's flopping. People are really hesitant to sing blues in church. You know, I ain't going to hell singing the blues in church. So, okay. When he comes back to Chicago, they meet him at the railroad station. They tell him his wife is dead, but the baby is still alive. And then 3 days later, the baby dies. He's devastated. He can't play anything. And then like 6 months later, he's walking past the piano, and those same chords hit him, but they hit him differently. Has a song, precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. Lord, I'm tired and I'm weak. Now, his singing voice was so formal, he literally would roll his R's. Precious Lord, you know. So he's got a great song, he thinks. It might be a hit. But his voice does not really do justice, or his presentation does not really do justice to the song. There's a young woman out of Louisiana by the name of Mahalia Jackson who does hair on the side, but sings in churches, comes from this background of holiness singing. Even though she grew up listening to great blueswomen named Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey, her religion wouldn't let her sing the blues. She wants to sing for God. But she's got all this bluesiness in her voice. So somehow Dorsey and Mahalia Jackson get together, and she records that song, and it becomes a hit. Because that bluesiness combined with Georgia Tom Dorsey's lyricism becomes something like this. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. Lord, I'm tired, I'm weak, and I'm woe. Through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand. Praise of the Lord, lead me on. Right? You've got now sort of the beginnings of classic gospel. All the people who follow in Mahalia's footsteps, and her compatriots, a fine guitar playing woman by the name of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. And then a generation later, of course, the great Aretha Franklin, who comes from my hometown of Detroit. All of those folks like stand in the footsteps of Mahalia. As years go by, you listen to whoever your favorite artist is. You listen to Yolanda Adams, or you listen to BB and CeCe Winans, and you know, you don't know about Mahalia, or you don't know about Marian Anderson. And so gospel has always been what happens when you take a popular style of music and then you put sacred lyrics on top of it, just like Dorsey did with blues. Bill Monroe does with bluegrass, Doc Watson does with old-timey.
Through many centuries, music within Christian churches has had its own history of telling the gospel story with many different types of choirs and instrumentation throughout the world. So many well-known musicians and singers have had the opportunity to receive inspiring and free professional training in music through their early years of singing in a local church choir. Over the years, church choirs have created an environment of musical and cultural diversity, coming together as one common voice.
The thing that makes gospel quartet music the unique art form that it is the fact that you're spreading 4 parts with 4 guys singing it, as opposed to a normal choir, which has a soprano and alto, usually ladies, and a tenor and a bass, which are the guys. So it's called SATB. And for the soprano, alto, tenor, bass, you can spread those 4 parts with the ladies on the high notes and the guys on the lower notes. But when it's 4 guys singing it, that shifts all of that burden down the musical scale. And so the bass singer has to be really low, and for that to work, the tenor singer has to be really high. And that's kind of always been part of that genre, is gospel quartet music, ideally, in a perfect world, sounds like one voice singing 4 parts.
When we shall leave this place.
Yeah, the Blackwood Brothers started in Mississippi in 1934. My dad was the youngest of 3 brothers. His older brother Doyle, his oldest brother Roy, and Roy was actually about 18 years older than my dad. Got married when he was 18, had a son at 20. So my dad's nephew was 2 years his junior. And the 4 of them, Roy, Doyle, my dad James, and Roy's son R.W., were the original 4 Blackwood Brothers. And they started singing at just little churches down in the middle of Mississippi. And they got on a local radio station and started getting, notoriety just because they could sing and harmonize so well together. They made it through that first hurdle and then moved to the capital city of Mississippi, Jackson, got on WJDX radio there. After a few years, things really started to happen for them. Moved to Shreveport, Louisiana briefly, were hit on the radio there, and then there were a lot of groups doing what they were doing in the South, beginning of the 40s, so they got an offer to move to Iowa. Might as well have been Alaska for some guys from Mississippi, but they moved to Iowa, a little town in the southwest corner of Shenandoah, Iowa. That was not a very big place, but they had a really big radio station called KMA. Mr. Earl May had a seed and feed company there in the middle of the farmland, the heartland, and he had a radio station that would, worked in conjunction with his seed and feed company. In the late 40s, my grandparents were aging, and they felt like it'd be wisdom to move closer back to Mississippi and located in Memphis. Shenandoah, where they were in the 40s, had a population of about, I think, 30 or 40,000 people. Memphis had a population of 400,000 people. It was already a big city, and a lot of hustle bustle. They started a daily radio program and TV programs there every week, and then started holding monthly concerts in the downtown auditorium called the Ellis Auditorium. So they really made a big splash in the early 50s there in Memphis, and they started traveling by private plane. They bought a plane, R.W. Blackwood and Bill Lyles, the bass singer, got their licenses to fly, and so they were flying to make it possible to travel further distances and sing to audiences further away from Memphis than a car ride or a bus ride would afford.
When we all see Jesus, okay, we'll sing and shout the victory. Shout the
There's a whole lot of that I don't remember.
Earth is mine, mine, mine. Over in Zion, I got a new home. Over in Zion, I got a new home. No more sickness, I got a new home. No more dying, I got a new home. Over in Zion, I got a new home. Over in Zion, I got a new home. Over in Zion, I got a new home. I got a new home. Over in Zion.